Water. Heavy, rushing water, hitting a hollow fiberglass basin, bouncing off tile. Not rain, not the car radio. My hand hovered over the silver door latch. The metal radiated heat. The October sun in Savannah baked the interior of the sedan. The air was thick. The smell of old, spilled yogurt rose from the back seat. Wyatt had dropped a pouch 2 days ago. The sour sweetness was baked into the fabric. A sharp hiss of static sliced through the rushing sound. Where was it coming from? My head turned. My chest tightened. The breath caught in my throat. I stared at the brick wall of the daycare building. I needed to go inside. I needed to sign the clipboard and pick up my 18-month-old son, but the sound pinned me to the seat. I looked down at the dashboard. The bright screen of my phone glared in the sun. I reached for it. My fingers were thick and clumsy. The plastic case was warm against my palm. The baby monitor application was open. I opened it 30 times a day. I opened it when I woke up. I opened it in the break room at Memorial Health. I am a 28-year-old pediatric nurse who works 3 night shifts a week. I document breathing rates and medication drips for 12 hours straight. Tracking things is how I survive. Watching the empty hallway of our rental house was a habit, an anchor. The video feed showed the nursery. The camera sat on the high corner shelf above the changing table. The crib was empty. Wyatt was not in there. He was 20 feet away from me, inside the brick building. But the nursery door was open, and so was the bathroom door across the hall. The microphone was sensitive enough to catch every sound that traveled through. The microphone picked up every echo clearly. The bathtub was filling. The water hit the bottom of the tub with a violent roar, then a new sound cut through the noise. A laugh. It was a light, breathy sound. A woman's laugh. It echoed against the small space. It did not belong to the neighbor who sometimes watered our plants. It did not belong to any nurse I recognized. The water shut off abruptly. The sudden quiet left a ringing in my ears. "What time does she get home?" the woman asked. Her voice was clear, close to the camera. A second voice answered her. 6, right, that is what you said. 7. The single word dropped into the quiet car. The pitch was low. The cadence was measured and entirely relaxed. She picks him up late on Tuesdays. Connor, my husband of 5 years. She will never know. She is too tired to notice anything. The air conditioning vent blew directly onto my collarbone. The sweat on my neck turned to ice. My jaw locked tight. The muscles in my arms cramped as I gripped the steering wheel with my free hand. The back of my head pressed hard against the headrest. He sounded exactly like he sounded when he ordered coffee at the drive-through window. Bored, casual, in control. For 12 months I had lived with a tight knot in my stomach. I found a long black hair on his pillow in September. My hair is short and brown. He told me the bedroom light was playing tricks on my eyes. I smelled heavy floral perfume on his gym towel in June. He told me it was cheap locker room soap. I saw a heart emoji text from an unknown number in April. He told me it was a spam caller. He sat me down on the couch and held my hand. He looked at me with deep concern. He told me my night shifts were ruining my mind. He told me I was imagining things. He sent me to a doctor. He convinced me my grip on reality was slipping. I was perfectly sane. I was right every single time. My thumb hovered over the smooth glass screen. I did not drop the device. I did not scream. I did not hit the steering wheel. A pediatric nurse does not panic when a monitor alarms. A nurse assesses the situation. A nurse secures the evidence. I located the small red circle in the top right corner of the application interface. I pushed it. The numbers on the screen turned red and began to count upward. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. I sat in the sweltering car and listened to them step into the water. I listened to my husband talk about our son as a mere variable in his schedule. I listened to the strange woman laugh again. "I handle everything," Connor said. The water splashed lightly in the background. "The money, the insurance, her phone. She does not even check." He let out a short, quiet laugh. "Her therapist thinks she is paranoid." I made sure of that. The cold weight inside my chest hardened into absolute stone. It was not a mistake. It was not a misunderstanding. He had referred me to Dr. Linden on purpose. He required the paperwork to say I was unstable. He engineered insurance against this exact moment. I kept the phone pressed against my ear and I recorded exactly 17 minutes of the life he was living inside my home. I did not wipe the sweat stinging my eyes. I just watched the red timer tick upward. At 17 minutes, I pressed the button again. The file saved. I pushed open the heavy car door. The humid Savannah heat hit me. I walked across the asphalt. I pulled the glass door of the daycare open. The receptionist smiled at me. I signed the clipboard with a steady hand. I walked back to the toddler room. Wyatt was sitting on the carpet. He held a plastic block. He looked up and babbled. He reached his arms up. I picked him up. The smell of baby powder and warm skin filled my nose. I pressed my face into his neck. I carried him out to the car. I buckled the straps of his car seat. I checked the tension twice. I got into the driver's seat and started the engine. The house was quiet when I unlocked the front door. I balanced Wyatt on my left hip. My heavy nursing shoes made no sound on the entryway rug. I stood still and listened. The water was running again. It was a dull, vibrating hum coming from down the hall. I looked down. 2 pairs of shoes sat neatly on the rubber mat by the door. One pair was Connor's white gym sneakers. The other was a pair of small brown leather sandals. They were a size 7 at most. I walked down the hall. The air grew thick. Steam was escaping through the narrow gap under the bathroom door. The moisture settled on my cheeks and left a sticky film on my skin. I looked down at the carpet. The pale beige fibers were dark and saturated. Water was seeping out from beneath the doorframe and soaking into the hall runner. Wyatt shifted on my hip. He pointed a chubby finger toward the white door. "Dada," he said. His voice was loud in the quiet hallway. I heard a splash from inside the bathroom. The water shut off abruptly. The sudden silence was deafening. A thick scent hit my nose. It was lavender body wash. I do not buy lavender. I buy unscented oatmeal soap for Wyatt and plain bars for myself. The heavy floral smell belonged to the woman in my bathtub. I carried Wyatt into his bedroom. I set him down gently in his crib. I handed him his favorite plush dog. He sat down and began chewing on the dog's ear. I stepped backward out of his room and pulled his door shut. It clicked into place. I walked back to the bathroom door. Our house is a cheap rental property. The interior doors are standard hollow core wood. The locks are simple privacy knobs. But Connor and I had locked ourselves out of the bedroom once last year. I had learned where the landlord kept the emergency keys. A small, flat metal tool sat on the dusty ledge of the doorframe above my head. I reached up. My fingers brushed the dust and found the cold metal key. I slid the tool into the small slot on the outside of the bathroom knob. I gripped the handle. I turned the key to the right. A loud, mechanical click echoed in the hallway. "Is that you?" I stood on the wet carpet. I did not answer. "Hey, babe," Connor said. He paused. When he spoke again, his tone shifted. It was his casual public voice, the voice he used at barbecues. "I'm just getting cleaned up. I will be out in a second." I leaned close to the door panel. I kept my voice entirely flat. "Stay in there." The silence stretched for 3 agonizing seconds. "What?" Connor asked. His casual tone slipped. "Tessa, what are you doing?" I said. "Stay in there," I repeated. I heard a sharp intake of breath. It was not Connor. "Oh, my word," a woman whispered. "Oh, my word." "Tessa, open this door," Connor demanded. He jiggled the inside knob. The locked mechanism held firm. The wood rattled in the frame. "You are overreacting! Open the door right now." He was already doing it. Before he even put a towel on, he was telling me I was overreacting. He was shifting the reality of the situation. I stepped back from the door. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I scrolled through my contacts. Last week, Connor had taken my phone while I was cooking dinner. He told me he was cleaning up my contact list and blocking spam callers for me. I had thanked him. I found the recent call logs. I found a number that had tried to reach me 2 weeks ago. I dialed it. The line rang twice. "Hello," a man's voice answered. It was rough and deep. "This is Tessa Holbrook," I said. "Your wife is in my bathroom with my husband. You need to come here now." The line went silent. I counted 3 full seconds in my head. "I know the address," the man said. The call ended. He already knew. He had tried to warn me. He was one of the spam numbers Connor had blocked. I looked down at my hands. They were not shaking. For the first time in 12 months, my hands were completely steady. The pounding on the bathroom door grew louder. Connor shouted my name. I slid down the hallway wall and sat on the damp carpet. I pulled my knees to my chest. I listened to my husband panic on the other side of the cheap wood, and I waited. 15 minutes passed. The heavy rumble of a truck engine vibrated through the living room window. Tires scraped hard against the concrete driveway. The vehicle parked at a sharp, aggressive angle. Heavy footsteps pounded up the front steps. I opened the front door. Tilled on the porch. He was tall, with broad shoulders, and worn leather work boots. Grease stained the knees of his denim pants. He did not introduce himself. He did not ask if I was okay. He stepped past me and walked straight down the narrow hallway toward the bathroom. "Locked," I said to his back. The man stopped in front of the white door. He looked at the cheap wood. He shifted his weight, lifted his right boot, and kicked the space right next to the knob. The hollow wood splintered instantly. The lock tore through the frame. The door slammed open and bounced off the interior tile wall. Thick, heavy steam rolled out into the hallway. The air smelled intensely of lavender and hot breath. The bathtub water had gone cold and still. Connor sat in the water. He scrambled upward, grabbing a wet white towel to cover his waist. His chest heaved. The woman crouched in the far corner of the tub, pulling her knees tight against her chest. Her dark hair was plastered to her wet face. "This is unacceptable," Connor stammered, pointing a shaking finger at the man. "You cannot do this. This is my house." The man ignored him. He looked down at the woman in the corner. His voice was completely flat. "Get up," Jared, the woman whispered. Her voice shook violently. "He told me they were separated. He told me they did not even live in the same part of the house." "He told you a lot of things," Jared said. He did not yell. The quiet tone carried more weight than a scream. The woman stepped out of the tub. She wrapped a green towel around her shoulders. She stepped into the hallway, leaving wet footprints on the soaked carpet. Her eyes darted around the narrow space, looking for an exit. Then she stopped. Her gaze locked onto the wall across from the bathroom. 3 framed photographs hung in a neat row. The center frame held a large print from our wedding day. Connor wore a tailored black suit. I wore a white dress. The frame next to it showed Connor in a hospital chair, holding a newborn Wyatt wrapped in a striped blanket, while I leaned against his shoulder. The woman stared at the photos. The panic in her eyes vanished, replaced by an absolute hollow blankness. She turned her head slowly to look at Connor. "You told me she was just a friend. You told me the baby was not yours." The water dripped from Connor's hair onto his collarbone. He stood in the living room 10 minutes later, wearing a pair of gray sweatpants. The panic from the bathroom had vanished. His posture was straight. His shoulders were pulled back. The performance was back on. "You broke into the bathroom," Connor said. He pointed his finger at the center of my chest. "You called a strange man to assault me in my own home. This is domestic violence, Tessa. I am the victim here." He pulled his phone from his pocket. "I am calling the police," he said. I kept my hands at my sides. Call them. I have a recording. His thumb stopped moving over the screen. The muscles in his jaw froze. What recording 17 minutes? I said. On the baby monitor application. The mask cracked. The confident posture dissolved in an instant. His shoulders dropped. His eyes darted toward the open nursery door down the hall, where the small camera sat on the high corner shelf. He swallowed hard. Is that why you sent me to Dr. Linden? I asked. My voice remained steady and low. So when this day came, you would have paperwork that says, I am unstable. Connor opened his mouth. No sound came out. He stared at me. Jared stood by the front door. The woman named Diana stood behind him, staring at the floor. Jared turned the brass doorknob. He looked back at me before he walked out. I tried calling you, Jared said. 2 weeks ago. He blocked my number on your phone. The door closed behind them. The house fell silent again. I walked into the nursery. Wyatt was awake, standing at the edge of his crib holding the wooden rail. I picked him up. His small hands grabbed the collar of my scrubs. I sat in the rocking chair by the window. I looked up at the small white camera on the high corner shelf. The green power light blinked steadily. Connor called it a toy for anxious mothers. He mocked it. But that plastic lens had captured the truth. I had the truth in my pocket. But the heavy, sinking weight in my chest remained. Having the truth did not fix the shattered walls of this house. I stared at the dark street outside the window. I shifted Wyatt to my left arm, pulled my phone from my pocket with my right hand, and opened a blank browser page. I typed 4 words into the search bar. Divorce lawyer, Savannah, Georgia. The leather chair in Faye Prescott's office smelled like lemon polish and old dust. The air conditioning blasted from a ceiling vent directly above my head. The chill settled into my skin and raised goosebumps along my bare arms. I had driven straight downtown from a 12-hour night shift at Memorial Health. I was still wearing my blue scrubs. There was a faint stain of powdered formula on my left shoulder. Wyatt sat content on my lap. He chewed on a honey graham cracker. Small crumbs fell onto my lap and scattered onto the dark leather seat. He babbled, quietly oblivious to the heavy mahogany desk and the towering bookshelves lining the walls. Faye sat across from me. She was 44 years old and wore a sharp gray suit. She did not offer me sympathetic smiles. She did not hand me a tissue. She simply listened. I placed my phone on the wide desk and played the 17-minute recording from the baby monitor application. Faye kept her face neutral. She took notes on a yellow legal pad with a heavy gold pen. When the recording ended, she folded her hands over the paper. Georgia is a one-party consent state, Faye said. Her voice was steady and professional. The device belonged to you. You were in your own home. That audio is entirely admissible. I pulled Wyatt a little closer to my chest. He dropped a piece of cracker and reached for my badge reel. He sent me to a therapist, I said. My throat felt dry. The words tasted like ash. He told me I was losing my mind. He made the appointment for me. I think he wanted a record that said I was unstable. Faye nodded slowly. She picked up her pen again. We can use that, Faye said. If the recording proves he admitted the affair was real and that he actively plotted to keep you in the dark, then those therapy notes stop being proof of your delusion. They become proof of his premeditated manipulation. It shows a documented pattern of control. She explained the legal landscape. We would file for a fault divorce based on adultery. In this state, adultery bars the offending spouse from receiving alimony. Connor made more money than I did as the branch manager of a fitness chain, but the fault filing would put his actions on the public record. It would secure my position. I need you to do something tonight, Faye said. She leaned forward, her eyes locked onto mine. Go into your phone settings. Check the blocked numbers list. Take a screenshot of every single number on that list before he realizes what you are doing and unblocks them to pretend it never happened. I walked out of the heavy glass doors of the law office with Wyatt resting on my hip, The harsh Savannah sun hit my face. The heat pressed against my cold skin. For the first time in nearly 2 years, the path was clear. Every next step was visible. I sat in my driveway later that evening while Wyatt slept in his car seat. The engine was off. The windows were down. I opened the settings application on my phone. My thumb scrolled down to the privacy section. I tapped the blocked contacts list. There were 7 numbers on the screen. My fingers moved with pure muscle memory. I pressed the 2 side buttons simultaneously. The screen flashed white. I saved the image. I did it again. I documented the list the way I documented patient vitals at the hospital. I stared at the glowing names. Jared Cole. That was the man who had kicked my door open. Another number belonged to my mother in Ohio. Another belonged to my old best friend from nursing school in Columbus. Connor had isolated me. He had taken my phone while I was cooking dinner, claiming he was clearing out spam callers and telemarketers, and he had systematically cut the wires to my outside world. I unblocked my mother. I dialed her number. The line rang twice before she answered. Tessa. Her voice was thin and sharp with surprise. "Hi, Mom," I said. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Tessa, I have called you so many times. It always went straight to voicemail. You never answered." I gripped the steering wheel tight. The leather creaked under my fingers. "I know, Mom. I know now." The silence that followed was not empty. It was the kind of quiet that holds the weight of months. I could hear her breathing change. The thin, careful control broke apart. "I thought you were angry with me," she said. Her voice cracked on the last word. "After our last conversation, when I told you to come home and you said Connor needed you to stay, and then the phone just stopped ringing. I called every Sunday morning for 3 months. I left messages. I asked if Wyatt was walking yet." My throat closed. I pressed my palm flat against the center of the steering wheel. The horn pad was warm from the engine heat. Wyatt was not walking yet when she stopped being able to reach me. He had taken his first steps 2 months ago in the living room, reaching for the leg of the coffee table. I had sent Connor a video. I had not sent one to my mother because her number was buried in a blocked list I never opened. "He blocked you, Mom," I said. "Connor blocked your number on my phone." "He blocked 7 people." The line went quiet again. When she spoke, her voice was entirely different. The grief was gone. Something harder had taken its place. "I am booking a flight," she said. "Give me the address." The next afternoon, I met Jared at a small coffee shop near the hospital. The place smelled like roasted beans and burnt milk. Jared wore his heavy denim work pants and a faded gray shirt. He slid a stack of printed papers across the small wooden table. They were location tracking screenshots from his wife. The data showed 23 separate check-ins at my address over the last 2 months. Every single visit aligned with my hospital schedule. She was there when I was working. She was there when I was asleep in the back bedroom. "I tried to call you," Jared said. He wrapped his rough hands around a white ceramic mug. "I tried twice. Your husband picked up the phone the second time. He told me if I ever called that number again, he would file harassment charges against me." I took the papers and slid them into my canvas bag. I nodded. I did not apologize for my husband. I just gathered the evidence. When I drove back to the house, I parked in the driveway and popped open the glove box. I dug past the vehicle registration and the old tire warranty. My hand brushed against a folded white paper. I pulled it out into the daylight. It was the therapy intake form from Dr. Linden. I had shoved it in there 6 months ago. I unfolded the paper. My eyes scanned the black ink. The referral source line read, "Husband." The presenting issue line read, "Anxiety, sleep disruption, suspicion of spousal infidelity." I smoothed the creases out of the paper. I placed it carefully into a manila folder with the location tracking data. I had everything. On Monday morning, I sat in Faye's office again. The documents on her desk were thick and heavy. "I filed the complaint for divorce this morning," Faye said. She handed me a copy. I also filed a motion for a standing order. Once the judge signs it, neither party can drain the joint checking accounts, cancel the health insurance, or transfer property. His assets will be frozen until we get to a hearing. I held the thick stack of paper. The legal language was dense, but the weight of it in my hands felt like gravity. It felt real. I drove home. Wyatt was napping. I walked through the quiet living room. I looked at the gray sofa. I looked at the television stand. I looked at the kitchen counters. For the first time since we moved to Georgia, it felt like my space. I had drawn a boundary around my son and my life. The paranoid wife, the tired nurse, the woman who imagined things in the shadows had just filed a lawsuit. The illusion of victory lasted exactly 24 hours. My phone rang on Tuesday afternoon. The caller identification showed Connor. A process server had visited the fitness center an hour ago. He had been served. I accepted the call. I expected him to yell. I expected the panicked, frantic tone I had heard through the bathroom door. He did not yell. His voice was incredibly cold. It was the voice of a branch manager, firing a junior employee. "You made a mistake," Tessa Connor said. I stood in the kitchen. I kept my breathing even. "Talk to my lawyer." "My lawyer is going to make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what is in your medical history," Connor said smoothly. "He is going to subpoena Dr. Linden. Everyone will read about your paranoia. They will read about your severe insomnia." He paused. The silence on the line was deliberate and heavy. "And they will hear about the daycare," Connor continued. "You left our 18-month-old son alone in a building while you sat in a parking lot. You sat in a sweltering car for 17 minutes, recording a baby monitor, instead of walking inside to pick him up. What kind of mother prioritizes a spy camera over her child?" The blood drained from my face. My hand gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. The formica was cold against my palm. He had taken my strongest piece of evidence and twisted it. He was reframing the 17-minute recording. He was not going to deny the audio existed. He was going to use the timestamp to prove I was a negligent, unstable mother who abandoned her toddler to indulge a paranoid delusion. "I will see you in court," Connor said. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. I looked at the dark screen. He had built the trap a year ago, and I had walked directly into it. The phone call was only the beginning. Connor did not wait for a judge to look at the paperwork before he started dismantling my life. He fought me in the neighborhood first. He told his story to everyone. He told the men at his gym. He told the couples we sat with at church. He told them I was struggling with postpartum issues and that I had developed an obsession about him having an affair. He told them I locked him in our bathroom and called a strange man to break into our rental house. He framed his betrayal as my mental breakdown. He painted himself as the exhausted, dedicated husband trying to hold his family together. The shift came within days. I walked to the end of the driveway to check the mail on a Tuesday morning. Mrs. Gable was watering her front flower beds across the street. She usually waved and asked about Wyatt. That morning, she turned her back and pulled the hose toward her garage, without looking at me. At the grocery store on Wednesday, I pushed Wyatt's stroller through the cereal aisle and nearly ran into 2 women from our church small group. They had been at our house for a potluck 6 months ago. One of them had held Wyatt on her knee and told me what a beautiful family we had. Now they stood together near the granola bars and watched me approach. One leaned toward the other and whispered something behind her hand. When I passed them, the taller woman gave me a tight, thin smile. The kind of smile people give to strangers at a funeral. "We are praying for your family, Tessa," she said. I pushed the stroller past them without stopping. My phone buzzed later that afternoon. It was a text message from a woman who took classes at Connor's gym. We used to chat in the daycare pickup line. The message read that she was praying for me and Connor, and that she hoped I would get the help I desperately needed. Then his mother called me from her home across town. Her voice was thick with tears and accusation. She asked me how I could do this to her son. She told me he was a good man who worked hard to provide for us. She said she had warned Connor years ago that I was too young and too far from home to be a proper wife. I sat on the edge of my bed and listened to the dial tone after she hung up. The pattern was repeating itself at a larger scale. For 12 months, Connor told me I was imagining things, and the isolation sealed the lie shut. Now he was telling the entire town the same story, and their silence was doing the same work. His lawyer filed a motion for temporary custody the following week. Faye called me into her office to read it. The document cited documented mental health concerns. It included an incident report highlighting the 17 minutes I sat in the daycare parking lot. The paperwork formally requested a psychological evaluation for me and primary custody for Connor. We went to the courthouse on a Friday morning for the temporary orders hearing. Faye had filed an emergency motion citing a toddler present in the home during the affair. The expedited date arrived before I had time to prepare for it. I dropped Wyatt at daycare at 7:30. The morning air was cold and damp. Spanish moss hung motionless from the live oaks along the boulevard. I drove downtown with both hands on the wheel and parked in a lot 3 blocks from the courthouse because the meters on the street were full. I walked the 3 blocks in the borrowed navy blue blouse and a pair of black pants from the clearance rack at Target. I did not own court clothes. My closet held scrubs, cotton t-shirts, and one dress I wore to a hospital fundraiser 2 years ago. The blouse smelled faintly of someone else's laundry detergent. The corridor inside the courthouse was wide and bright and smelled like floor wax and recycled air. The bench outside the courtroom was hard wood, with a thin back rail. The edge cut into the back of my thighs. I sat with my hands in my lap and watched people come and go. Lawyers in dark suits. A woman carrying a manila folder the same way I carried mine. The overhead fluorescent lights buzzed at a frequency that crawled under my skin. Faye arrived at 8:45. She sat next to me and opened her briefcase on the bench. She did not offer reassurance. She reviewed the documents one last time. Connor sat at the table across the aisle. He wore a crisp, perfectly pressed polo shirt. He looked entirely calm. He wore the expression of a deeply concerned father. Judge Hambrick sat high behind the bench. She was a stern woman who read through the thick stack of files through a pair of reading glasses resting on the bridge of her nose. The hearing was a disaster. Connor's lawyer stood up and presented Dr. Linden's intake form. He read the words aloud to the room. He emphasized the phrase paranoid ideation about spousal infidelity. He presented Connor's sworn statement about the broken bathroom door and the strange man entering the house. Then he brought up the 17 minutes I spent in my car while Wyatt was inside the daycare facility. He painted a picture of a mother who completely detached from reality and abandoned her toddler. Faye stood up immediately. She argued that the therapy referral was orchestrated specifically to create this false paper trail. She told the judge we had audio evidence of the affair and the manipulation. Judge Hambrick held up a hand. She did not look up from the file. She told Faye to save the audio evidence for mediation. She stated she was only ruling on temporary living arrangements based on the immediate documentation in front of her. The judge split the decision. She granted me exclusive use of the rental house, but she ordered a temporary shared custody arrangement. Wyatt would spend 1 week with me and the following week with Connor at his newly rented apartment. The cycle would repeat until a formal custody evaluation could be completed. I walked out of the double wooden doors of the courtroom. The air conditioning in the hallway suddenly felt freezing. I stood near the elevators with Faye. She touched my arm and told me this was only temporary. She promised that everything would change once they actually heard the recording in a formal mediation setting. I barely heard her. I was doing the math in my head. Connor was taking Wyatt on Sunday afternoon. I had never been away from my son for more than a 12-hour hospital shift. Now I was going to lose him for 7 entire days. The judge had looked at the printed notes, looked at Connor in his pressed shirt, and saw exactly what he wanted her to see. Sunday evening arrived entirely too fast. Connor picked Wyatt up at 3 o'clock. I handed over the diaper bag and the car seat. I closed the front door and locked it. The house was hollow. I walked down the hallway and stood in the doorway of the nursery. The crib was empty. A faint yellow stain of spilled formula marked the corner of the fitted sheet. I had not washed it because the cotton still smelled exactly like Wyatt. The white plastic baby monitor sat on the high corner shelf. The small green power light blinked steadily, staring down into an empty room. The silence in the house was incredibly heavy. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. The wall clock ticked in the living room. Every sound amplified the absence of my son. I picked up a small pair of cotton pajamas from the changing table. They had little brown bears printed on the fabric. They were a size 18 months. I held the soft material in my hands and looked up at the blinking green light of the camera. That little device was supposed to save me. I had recorded the absolute truth. I had taken it to a lawyer. I had filed the papers and shown up in court in a borrowed blouse. Every step was supposed to lead to the moment when someone in a position of authority looked at me and said, "You were right." But the nursery was empty. The crib sheet smelled like formula and baby shampoo and the fading warmth of my son's skin. And no amount of legal paperwork could put him back in that bed tonight. I lowered myself to the floor. The carpet was thin and rough against my knees. I pressed my back against the wall beneath the window and pulled the bare pajamas into my lap. The cotton was soft and limp, and entirely too small to hold the weight of what I was carrying. The green light on the camera blinked at me from the shelf. On and off, a steady pulse in a dead room. I had been chasing something with that camera, and every piece of evidence I gathered after it. I had been chasing the moment when Connor, or the judge, or the neighbors on our street would look at me and stop calling me paranoid. I had fought for months to earn a word from someone else's mouth, but the judge had not asked me a single question. She weighed the paper and the performance, and the paper won. Outside the window, a car passed slowly on our street. The headlights swept across the ceiling and disappeared. The house settled back into silence. When I found the black hair on his pillow in September, my hand had not hesitated. I picked it up. I held it against my own short brown hair. I saw the difference. The evidence was right there between my fingers. I did not need Connor to agree. I did not need a judge to confirm what my own two hands could measure. The recording on my phone was the same. 17 minutes of steady breathing and clear audio. I had not screamed. I had not dropped the phone. I assessed, documented, and secured. That was the work of a trained nurse, not a paranoid wife. The green light blinked. On. Off. I reached for my phone. I opened the application. I scrolled back and found the 17-minute file. I pressed play. This time, Connor's voice was just noise. The woman's laugh was background. What filled the quiet nursery was the sound underneath all of it. My own breathing, steady and even, measured and calm. The sound of a person who already possessed the truth before the microphone confirmed it. I was done waiting for permission. I was done building a case for an audience. The evidence was always for the courtroom, but the certainty was mine, and it had been mine from the very first moment. I opened my contact list and dialed my lawyer. Faye answered on the second ring. "Push the mediation forward," I told her. My voice was low and steady in the empty house. "Get the earliest date possible. I want them to sit in a room and hear every single second of it." Faye agreed. We ended the call. I placed Wyatt's pajamas gently into the laundry basket. I reached up to the high shelf and unplugged the baby monitor from the wall outlet. The green light died. For the first time, I turned the device off because I chose to, not because the room was empty. The conference room in the mediator's office smelled like stale coffee and dry erase markers. It was week 8 of the legal process. I sat next to Faye at the long glass table. I was wearing my blue hospital scrubs. I had come straight from my pediatric night shift, and I had deliberately chosen not to change. The scrubs were the uniform of my actual life. The life that paid the bills and kept my son fed and showed up at 3 a.m. when a child on the ward stopped breathing. Connor sat directly across from us. He wore a sharp gray suit. The heavy lavender and cedar cologne reached me from 4 feet away. The same scent I had found on his gym towel back in June, the scent he told me was cheap locker room soap. His lawyer sat next to him, resting his hands on a thick leather binder. Connor wore the composed, concerned expression he had worn in the courtroom. His back was straight. His hands were folded on the table. He looked like a man attending a business meeting, not a man whose 17 minutes of recorded conversation were about to fill the room. Faye did not waste time with opening pleasantries. She placed a small black speaker on the center of the glass table and pushed a button on her phone. The rushing water came first. Then the breathy laugh. Then Connor's voice, casual and clear. She will never know. She is too tired to notice anything. Connor kept his face blank for the first 10 seconds. He stared at a fixed point on the center of the table. His jaw was set. His breathing was even, but the recording did not stop at the first sentence. It kept going. His recorded voice discussed my therapy sessions. It discussed our toddler's daycare schedule. It discussed how he handled my phone, my insurance, my contact list. The muscles in his jaw tightened. A vein rose along the side of his neck. The color drained from his cheeks in slow, visible stages, like watching a tide pull back from sand. His eyes darted toward the mediator, searching for something to grab onto. The confident mask dissolved. Faye laid her printed pages out on the glass table like playing cards. She presented the location tracking data, matching the exact date and time of the audio recording. She slid the therapy intake form across the smooth surface. Referred by husband, the black ink read. She explained to the mediator that the document was dated 6 months before I ever discovered the affair. She presented the physical screenshots of the 7 blocked numbers on my phone, highlighting my mother in Ohio and the man who had tried to warn me. Faye called it a documented pattern of calculated isolation and emotional abuse. Connor's lawyer stared at the papers. He did not try to argue. He asked the mediator for a brief recess. He and Connor stepped out into the carpeted hallway. The heavy wooden door clicked shut behind them. I could hear their voices through the wall, but could not make out the words. Faye sat still beside me. She did not speak. She folded her hands over her legal pad and waited. I stared at the small black speaker on the glass table. The recording had stopped playing, but the silence in the room still carried the weight of Connor's voice. When they returned 10 minutes later, Connor looked at the floor. He refused to meet my eyes. His suit jacket was unbuttoned now. His hands were not folded on the table anymore. They rested palms down on the glass fingers, slightly spread as if the surface was the only thing keeping him upright. His lawyer cleared his throat and announced they were prepared to discuss terms. Connor signed the temporary agreement granting me primary physical custody right there at the table. His hand shook as he dragged the pen across the signature line. The black ink was thin and unsteady. I watched him write his name in a hand that looked nothing like the confident strokes on our marriage certificate. I did not cheer. The feeling that filled my chest was not victory. It was something quieter and heavier. Relief, maybe. Or just the deep exhaustion of a fight that should never have been necessary. I counted 3 full seconds of silence before I let out my breath. A week later, I sat in Faye's office again. She handed me a printed statement signed by the woman from my bathroom. Diana had cooperated fully with our legal team. Her written statement confirmed the 8-month duration of the affair. It confirmed Connor had told her I was just an old friend who needed a temporary place to stay, and that Wyatt was not his biological child. Diana had included a small handwritten note at the bottom of the formal typed page. He told me the problem was his crazy roommate, she wrote. He told you the problem was your paranoia. Turns out, the problem was just him. I folded the heavy paper and slid it across the desk. I did not feel any lingering rage toward Diana. We were just 2 different women standing on opposite sides of one lie. She had believed she was saving a good man from a terrible living situation. I had believed I was failing a good man who was desperately trying to save my mental health. The divorce proceeded smoothly, on fault grounds. Because of the documented adultery, Connor was legally barred from seeking any alimony from my nursing salary under Georgia law. The child support was calculated using the standard income shares model. The battle was effectively over. The morning light in mid-January was pale and weak as it filtered through the thin curtains of Wyatt's bedroom. It was a Saturday. I stood by his new toddler bed and pulled a fresh cotton sheet over the mattress. The heavy lavender smell was entirely gone from the house. My bedroom had new blankets and curtains I had picked out myself. Wyatt ran circles around my knees. He babbled loudly and clutched a small plastic fire truck. The house was quiet, but it was a warm, living quiet. It was no longer the heavy, suffocating silence of a place holding a dark secret. The white plastic baby monitor still sat on the high corner shelf. I still used it when I worked my evening shifts and the babysitter was watching television in the living room. But it was just a simple plastic camera now. It was a normal household tool, not a desperate lifeline I used to verify my own sanity. My phone vibrated in the pocket of my sweatpants. It was my mother calling from Ohio. I answered it while pouring myself a cup of dark roast coffee in the kitchen. She told me she had finally booked her flight for Wyatt's second birthday next month. She was going to stay with us for 2 full weeks. The blocked numbers were gone. My life was open again. That afternoon, I buckled Wyatt into his car seat and drove to the daycare center for a weekend community play date. I pulled into the same parking spot I had used on that sweltering October afternoon 3 months ago. The engine idled quietly. Wyatt sang a happy, wordless song to himself in the back seat. His small sneakers kicked against the base of the car seat in a rhythm only he could hear. I looked down at my phone resting on the dashboard. The baby monitor application was still visible on the home screen. The small, square icon sat in the same place it always had. The red record button was hidden inside one tap away. 3 months ago, I had sat in this exact seat with the October sun baking my left cheek and the sour smell of old yogurt rising from the back seat. I had listened to my husband betray me through a 2-inch speaker. I had pressed record because a nurse does not trust memory. A nurse trusts documentation. But the woman who sat here now was not the same woman who had pressed that button. The woman in October needed the recording to prove she was sane. The woman in January did not need proof. She trusted her own hands, her own ears, the evidence of her own quiet, steady breathing. My life was far from finished. The night shifts still ran 12 hours. Wyatt still woke before dawn. The bills arrived on the 1st and the 15th, and some months the math was tight. But the exhaustion came from the life I was building, not from a cage someone else had locked around me. I closed the screen. I turned off the engine. I stepped out of the car and walked around to the passenger side. Wyatt reached both arms up. I unbuckled the straps, lifted him out, and set him on my hip. He grabbed the collar of my jacket with one hand and pointed at the brick building with the other. "Go, Mama," he said. "Go." I carried him inside.